A closer look at the physical reality of the global economy reveals the sheer scale of systemic resource extraction. According to the UN Environment Program, roughly $7.3 trillion are spent annually on activities that degrade nature. Against that outflow, nature-based solutions drew about $220 billion in 2023. That represents a 30-to-1 ratio between degradation and protection. Closing a gap of this magnitude requires mobilizing trillions in new capital. But the volume of capital is only half the problem. Injecting money into the nature category can fail in two distinct ways. Nature finance fails through undercapitalization, and it fails when capital is deployed without the rights, controls, or verified outcomes necessary to secure a result. The question of who benefits and who decides is becoming a problem of implementation. Which specific rights and evidence must be inside the instrument before the capital is committed? The primary bottleneck in the field has shifted from high-level principles to the mechanics of governance. To function, an integrated nature asset requires a single, coherent administrative ledger. Managing these assets requires a three-stage operating sequence, engineered before a single dollar moves. The first stage is ex ante legitimacy. This means establishing tenure, rights, and decision-making authority before capital is committed. Second is fiduciary control, keeping eligible expenditures and procurement traceable while capital is being deployed. The final stage is ex post integrity, where the ecological outcome is independently measured and verified afterward. These represent three distinct governance functions: legitimacy, control, and integrity. For the system to work, none of these functions can substitute for the others. These principles apply directly to the peat swamp forests and mangroves of Southeast Asia. The region has moved past debating whether the asset exists. The question now is how tenure and resource rights govern it. In 2026, the Philippines formalized its first national nature-based solutions policy through DENR Administrative Order No. 2026-30. This general order establishes a national registry and adaptation framework, but doesn't explicitly mandate project-level consent or benefit sharing. Compare that to the separate forest carbon rules, which contain explicit transaction-level safeguards, legally enforceable community protections, and grievance mechanisms. They also require free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC, for externally led projects in ancestral domains. Consent and benefit sharing are the foundations of the ground where the asset actually sits. While a national registry connects these functions, it does not replace the need for explicit project-level agreements. To test the second stage, fiduciary control, we shift to a municipal finance context in Scotland. The Scottish Nature Restoration Fund allocated £20 million directly to local councils. An investigation found almost £4 million of that allocation was redirected into general expenditure. The money was spent on routine items: IT equipment, office furniture, and council vehicles. Because the allocations were not ring-fenced, this spending did not breach the fund's terms or represent an unlawful diversion. It is a warning about design. When reporting does not link allocations to specific ecological outputs, money can count as nature finance without a traceable line to restoration. Protecting the use of funds requires ring-fencing and disbursement conditions that link capital to activity. Without these strict controls, public or private capital can flow heavily into a system without ever actually reaching the ground. The final stage applies to the most exposed strand of the nexus: return-seeking biodiversity finance. Specialist reviews indicate that providing routes for private money through credits or bonds is insufficient on its own. Research published in Nature Reviews Biodiversity highlights that conservation does not happen in a vacuum. Commercial and ecological risks are interdependent. A major challenge is the friction between the need for investor returns and the requirement for robust oversight. This tension exists because scaling returns can often conflict with the expense and rigor of long-term scientific monitoring. Relying on private finance alone may not be enough to deliver on biodiversity goals. Ex post integrity requires baselines, additionality tests, and independent verification to prove the outcome after implementation. Connecting a project to a capital market moves the money, but the conservation outcome remains a separate governed result. Governance turns a financial flow into a defensible ecological result. Constraints are cumulative. Challenges with measurement, accounting, and distribution all stack into a single implementation problem. A credible instrument must answer who holds rights, which expenditures are eligible, and how the outcome will be verified. This is the assessment and disclosure infrastructure being built by the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. Translating impacts into financial effects is the necessary first step toward creating a credible assurance regime. These implementation rules will be tested across several global milestones before the year ends. During Climate Week NYC, the focus will shift to whether corporate nature commitments are supported by disclosed evidence of implementation. In October, CBD COP17 in Armenia will put resource mobilization and benefit distribution at the center of the global treaty agenda. And in November, the Nature-Based Solutions International Congress in Paris will test whether standards and financing methods are converging into usable project architecture. The central question for practitioners is no longer just whether capital can be attracted to nature. Success depends on whether an instrument can prove that authorized capital reached eligible activities and produced a defensible result.